With breaking news, the war drums are beating louder and faster surrounding Iran, as protests have now entered their 5th straight day of action with no signs of slowing down. And before I break down the specifics here, I want to let you know that the reason why I use the word imminent in the title is because I've seen this before as a method to topple nations in the Middle East, and they're following their modus operandi to a T. Protests began on Thursday night in response to the failing economy and the rising fuel and food prices, a growing trend in nations all over the world. Donald Trump tweeted, "Many reports of peaceful protests by Iranian citizens fed up with regime's corruption and its squandering of the nation's wealth to fund terrorism abroad. Iranian government should respect their people's rights, including right to express themselves. The world is watching." And indeed, the whole world is watching as it continues to get worse by the day. 12 people were recently killed in Iran, and security forces are accused of opening fire. 12 people have been killed during the 4th night of spontaneous protests in Iran, according to state TV. The deaths follow reports that Iran's Revolutionary Guard vowed to crush dissent and take tough action if the unrest continued, in what began as a protest against economic policies and seemed to immediately morph into a call for regime change. Isn't it funny how a protest can just all of a sudden take a sudden turn like that? I wonder if it's possible that there were provocateurs there stirring things up in order to steer the direction of the protest. Well, this video appears to show just that, as you can see what has become common here in the West, a group of provocateurs dressed in black with their faces masked, smashing and vandalizing random public property. And now we've got this. Iran cuts off internet amid mass protests calls for armed uprising, which prompted
a terrorist nation like few others.
But if you look closely, Trump has ever so slightly adjusted his rhetoric. He shifted the blame solely on the government while calling for change. Of course, we've known for quite a while what kind of change the Trump administration would like to see in Iran.
Trump to tweet, "Iran, the #1 state of sponsored terror with numerous violations of human rights occurring on an hourly basis, has now closed down the internet so that peaceful demonstrators cannot communicate. Not good." Talk about manipulation. Iran has been in the crosshairs of the United States for decades, and they've always known that the only way to get people behind an invasion is to do it under the guise of a humanitarian mission. You may have missed this from the Wall Street Journal, which I'm sure is just purely coincidence. CIA creates new mission center to turn up the heat on Iran. The Central Intelligence Agency has established an organization focused exclusively on gathering and analyzing intelligence about Iran, reflecting the Trump administration's decision to make that country a higher priority target for American spies, according to U.S. officials. And of course, who could forget General Wesley Clark's warnings that the Pentagon issued a memo stating that they were going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and eventually finishing off with Iran. A link to that video will be located in the description below.
I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Go through the countries again.
Well, starting with Iraq, then Syria and Lebanon, then Libya, then Somalia and Sudan, and then back to Iran.
So needless to say, it's not looking good, folks. And now we have reports like this coming in. U.S. intelligence reportedly gives Israel green light to assassinate Iran's top general. According to reports circulating widely in Israeli media today, the United States has quietly given Israel the green light to assassinate Iran's top military officer.
Chiming in, the Israeli government has voiced encouragement for the anti-government protests.
Brave Iranians are pouring into the streets. They seek freedom, they seek justice, they seek the basic liberties that have been denied to them for decades. And when this regime finally falls, and one day it will, Iranians and Israelis will be great friends once again. I wish the Iranian people success in their noble quest for freedom.
It's quite the way to start out the new year, isn't it? They did it with Iraq, they did it with Libya, and they're doing it with Syria and Iran. It's called order out of chaos, folks. We need to recognize it and call it for what it is.
1,000 protested throughout Israel, yet the media and Trump have all but ignored them.
The Israeli, probably they're working very hard with the American to destabilize and to counter Iran, and basically the decision has been very clear and vocal by the Israeli. They want the United States to actually attack Iran militarily. So if they can use some incitement, they will do, but they know they can leave it to the United States to do the work on behalf of them in the end.
Backing protests abroad but ignoring mass demonstrations in your and your allies' backyards? It may be a new year, but good luck waiting for a new approach from the US or Israel on that.
And as they continue to beat the war drum faster and louder, we're going to continue to stay on top of this information so that you can see all sides of the geopolitical picture that is currently unfolding all around us. We'll have more on this story as it continues to develop, so be sure to give us a like.